Welcome back to Left Coast News. Today we're talking about something that should make every taxpayer in Washington State furious, and it has nothing to do with misinformation, hate, or whatever the latest excuse from Olympia is. What we're talking about, child care subsidies, hundreds of millions of dollars, and a state agency that couldn't even prove basic audits were being done. This isn't rumor, this isn't speculation. This comes straight out of state audit findings and legislative briefings. And once again, the pattern is familiar. Massive spending, little to no oversight, auditors waving red flags, and politicians telling you to move along, nothing to see here. Let's break this down.
Thanks for tuning in to leftcoastnews.net. News and information from the wacky, sometimes communist, liberal west coast of the United States. For more, visit leftcoastnews.net.
Washington State hands out hundreds of millions of dollars every year in child care subsidies through the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, DCYF. This money is supposed to help working families afford child care, be tied to actual attendance, be limited by licensed capacity, be audited, documented, and traceable. The last part, auditing, is not optional. It's required under federal grant rules, state accountability laws, and basic common sense when you're spending taxpayer money. But according to state auditors, that didn't happen. Here's the bombshell. For multiple years, the Washington State Auditor's Office says DCYF did not have the provider-level data needed to conduct proper audits. Now that was under Inslee, remember? The data daddy. Let that sink in. Auditors literally could not verify whether children were actually attending, whether providers were operating within capacity, whether payments matched reality, or whether funds were being improperly paid out. Why? Because DCYF didn't collect or retain the documentation auditors needed. Because in some cases, providers couldn't produce attendance records, capacity limits couldn't be verified, payments couldn't be tied to real-world activity. That means hundreds of millions of dollars moved with minimal verification. Not a paperwork issue, not an accounting technicality. This is systematic failure of oversight. And here's the part Olympia doesn't want you to remember. This problem wasn't new. State auditors going back years have flagged DCYF for weak internal controls, poor documentation, inability to demonstrate compliance. Yet instead of fixing the system first, the legislature expanded programs, increased funding, and lowered enforcement standards. Does all that sound familiar? This is the same government that tells you that you need permits, you need inspections, you need documentation, and you need compliance. But when they spend your money, suddenly audits are optional. Now Olympia's favorite line right now is there's no evidence of fraud. That's technically true and completely misleading. You don't find fraud when you don't verify attendance, you don't validate capacity, you don't collect records, and you don't audit payments. That's like closing your eyes and declaring the room is clean. Auditors didn't say everything is fine. They said we cannot verify compliance because the data doesn't exist. That's not reassurance, that's an indictment. And let's be clear about who pays for this. Not DCYF leadership, not legislators, not political appointees. You do. You pay for it. Every dollar that can't be audited is a dollar that can't be recovered, is a dollar that undermines public trust, is a dollar taken from families who actually need help. And instead of tightening controls, the political response has been defensive press statements, accusations of targeting, and blaming scrutiny itself. That's not accountability, that's institutional arrogance. The story isn't just about childcare. It's about how progressive government operates. Spend first, audit later, maybe. Expand programs before fixing failures, attack critics instead of correcting problems. Washington State has mastered this model. We see it time and time again, and it's getting really old. And every time auditors raise concerns, the response is, we'll improve in the future. Meanwhile, the money keeps flowing. Here's the bottom line. If a private business handled money this way, it would be shut down. If a nonprofit handled money this way, it would lose funding. If you handled your taxes this way, you'd be audited into oblivion. But when the state does it, they call it equity and move on. Washington doesn't have a child care funding problem. It has a government accountability problem. And until that changes, expect more audits, more excuses, and more of your money disappearing into systems no one can properly track. If you found this breakdown useful, share it. If you're tired of being told to trust systems that won't even audit themselves, you're not alone. We'll keep watching because clearly Olympia isn't. Thanks for watching.